As established in the last video, the murders at Hinterkaifeck were not just brutal, but they were chilling and mysterious. Many have speculated if the strange events reported by the family before the murders were paranormal, does that mean there's a paranormal explanation for the murders as well? Could that be why, after so long, there has never been a definitive suspect? Whilst the police may have never prosecuted anyone, they certainly had their eyes on a handful of people. So here are 5 of the biggest suspects of the Hinterkaifeck murders. Number 1. Karl Gabriel. Victoria Gabriel, the daughter of Andreas and Cecilia, lost her husband Karl during the First World War. Or did she? The body of Karl Gabriel was never found or recovered, so it didn't take long for malicious rumours to spread around the town after the family's murders, and to pin the blame on him. Is it really possible that he faked his death so that he could murder his family? Before we explore that idea, it's probably better to understand why. During the investigation, it was discovered that Victoria was having an incestuous relationship with her father Andreas, who may have even potentially fathered Joseph. Despite this emerging during the investigation, it was actually common knowledge throughout the town, which was accompanied by additional rumours that Andreas abused his wife as well. The identity of Joseph's father was a mystery. He was illegitimately conceived around 1919 to 1920, long after Karl's death in 1914, and Victoria never announced the name of the father. Is it possible that Karl knew of the affair and in a bit of revenge faked his death before murdering his family? The police treated this idea seriously enough to question Karl's former squadron, who evidently all claimed Karl had indeed died. But some have pointed to the idea of a pact being agreed to support their friend and fellow soldier. The idea of Karl surviving the war would have been dismissed without hesitation were it not for the emerging number of people who reported sightings of him over the years. Faking one's death during a war is not as crazy as it may seem. Karl would not have been the first, and he probably won't be the last. But would he really have committed this crime? Number 2. Lorenz Schmidt. It didn't take long for the town guide who discovered the bodies to fall under suspicion. Suspicions of Lorenz arose when rumours of him having a relationship with Victoria and even fathering Joseph began to circulate. Lorenz's wife died in 1918, not long before Joseph would have been conceived, and the initials LS were listed as the father on Joseph's birth certificate. This, combined with his suspicious behaviour upon discovering the bodies, has also helped support this theory. It was noted by his friends who were with him when they discovered the bodies that he was able to access the farm with a key, which was suspicious enough as a key had gone missing days before the murders. But to make it even more bizarre, Lorenz entered the property alone and tampered with the bodies upon discovering them. When asked why, he stated so he could look for his son, Joseph. His strange comments didn't end there. He was also noted as stating that the killer was unable to bury the bodies of the family due to the frozen ground. But why would he have murdered the family? Some suggest he may have got revenge on Victoria and her father upon discovering their incestuous relationship, whilst others propose that Victoria had demanded financial support for her son Joseph, finances he wasn't prepared to supply. However, Lorenz was cleared as a suspect and was never charged. Whilst his reported behaviour seems questionable, it doesn't seem to be consistent with the other evidence. Remember, locks on the farm had been tampered with, which contradicts the statement of him accessing the house via a key. It's also believed the killer stayed on the farm for a few days after the murders. Lorenz was a key figure in the town, and his absence would definitely have been noted. Perhaps the only thing Lorenz was a key suspect in was being Joseph's father. Number 3. The Gump Brothers and the Beechler Brothers. I mentioned in the previous video that a local butcher spotted 2 suspicious men near the house after the murders. As it turns out, there were two different pairs of brothers suspected of being the culprits. Adolf and Anton Gump were connected with the case after Adolf was suspected of having a relationship with Victoria and had previously been involved in the murder of 9 peasants in Silesia years prior. Adolf and Anton had both spent their time in police custody in connection with the case, but they were never convicted. At some time in the 1950s, the sister of the Gump brothers confessed on her deathbed that the brothers were indeed responsible for the murders, which led to further investigations into the brothers. By this point, however, there just wasn't enough evidence left, and the police needed more than a deathbed confession to convict someone. So as a result, they were never convicted of the crimes. But a deathbed confession, not from just anyone, but their sister, combined with the strange men being spotted on the property after the murders, makes the Gump brothers the most likely suspects for some people. The Beechler brothers, on the other hand, were connected to the case through the first maid of the Gruber family and were accused of the murders by her. The Beechler brothers had worked on the farm before, so knew the layout of the premises well, and the maid had often heard them speak about the Gruber family, with one of the brothers believing the family should be killed. However, the Beechler brothers were known for being thieves and petty criminals. They were not murderers, and there's no evidence linking them. Not to mention, nothing of value was ever stolen from the farm, which seems to suggest that there was an entirely different motive. Number 4. Andreas himself. Is it possible Andreas murdered his family on his own before killing himself? There has never been a mention of suicide in this case, but given how primitive the technology was back then, is it possible anyone would have noticed? Is it possible that rumours of his incestuous relationship with his daughter were becoming too much? Is it possible that there wasn't any mysterious activity on the ranch at all, and that everything reported to the neighbours was just a ruse set up by Andreas himself in an attempt to establish a suspect other than himself? As strange as it may seem, this would explain why he was so against the police or anyone helping. It might also be the reason why an intruder was never found on the property. But why then kill himself? Perhaps Andreas committed the murders and lingered around the house for a few days, realising just what he had done. This would back up evidence of food being eaten and animals being cared for after the murders. Eventually, however, Andreas might have succumbed to the reality of what he did, resulting in suicide. According to the investigation, however, Andreas was struck and killed by a mattock the same way as everyone else, which is a very brutal and extreme way of committing suicide. But furthermore, it was revealed he died around the same time as the other victims, which more or less rules this theory out. That is, of course, if the investigation techniques of 1922 post-war Germany could be trusted. Number 5. Paul Muller. Recently, it has been suspected by American true crime author Bill James and his daughter Rachel McCarthy James that an American serial killer by the name of Paul Muller, who operated around the same time as the Hinterkaifeck murders, may have been responsible. Muller was known to murder families in isolated areas, with axe-like weapons, most notably the Villisca axe murders, which took place in Iowa in 1912. Muller killed a family of 6 and 2 house guests with an axe, similar to the weapon used at Hinterkaifeck. Muller was also known to have worked as a farmhand and a lumberjack, which would correlate with the suspicious unidentified man seen lurking at the forest edge. Further evidence showed that Muller's motivation was linked to prepubescent girls, which he had a sexual attraction to. In his murders, Muller would murder everyone before leaving the girl till last. Strangely enough, this actually matches with the Hinterkaifeck case, as it was discovered in the investigation that 7-year-old Kazelia was kept alive when the other families had died, and she had endured other injuries such as her hair being pulled out. But is it possible Paul Muller would have travelled so far to commit these murders? As it turns out, those that knew Muller described him as a German immigrant, and some have suggested that as police began to close in on him and his murders in America, he fled back to his native country where he continued his crimes. This is quite a bold claim, but whether you like it or not, a number of points seem to add up and make sense. As you can see, there are a number of people connected with the Hinterkaifeck murders, and there are still too many suspects for one video to cover. One final interesting point to be made: in 2007, a police academy re-examined the case with modern techniques, but determined there was simply not enough surviving elements of the case to come to any real conclusion, and stated a modern investigation was simply impossible, leaving the murders likely to be forever unsolved. However, they did ultimately come to their own conclusion as to who the killer was, but out of respect for the surviving family members, they chose not to publish the results. So what do you think? Who was responsible for the Hinterkaifeck murders?